Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third Thursday Science Webinar of the European Marine Board. My name is Sheila Heymans. I'm the Executive Director of the European Marine Board, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, a few housekeeping rules. Please make sure that your name is clearly entered when you ask into the Zoom so that we can know who you are. So when you're asking questions, we know who you are. Also, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. And when you do so, please, again, make sure we have your name and which organization and country you're from. That would really help us. If you have any technical issues, please put it in the chat. It'll only be visible to us, and we will be able to give you some support on that. Please be aware that we are recording this webinar, and it is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. So handle that accordingly. So without further ado, I would want to highlight that the focus of our webinar is today on the European research vessels document that we did a couple of years ago now. We are looking at the current status and the foreseeable evolution of the research vessels. It's building on our position paper number 25 on research vessels. And our speaker today is Per Nieuwejaar, who is the project director from the Institute of Marine Research, IMR, in Norway. And he was the chair of our working group on research vessels. So Per, I am going to hold on a moment. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and if you can share your screen and go ahead, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully you all see my screen by now, and good afternoon to everybody. And thank you, Sheila, for the introduction. I will try to give you some background on the European research vessel fleet, a little bit on where we are at the moment, and a little bit about what is the foreseeable future for the European research vessel fleet. As Sheila said, we did this European Marine Board position paper 25 that was published in the fall of 2019, and we also had the previous position paper number 10 way back in 2007 that actually was a very good document that really started the process of the European Commission funding 3 consecutive Eurofleets projects with a lot of activity around transnational access to your other research vessels and networking activities and joint research activities. So as for the European research vessel fleet, these position papers has been very useful and really important part of the developments over the last decade. So I will encourage everybody to download these documents and in particular the last one from 2019, which I will say a few words on what has happened since then during my talk. A little bit of background back to this the position paper 25. At that time we had 99 European research vessels that are so-called ERVO, European Research Vessel Operator approved, meaning that they can cover all the normal, the standard research tasks that we do with the vessels. And in addition, there are quite a number of others who are in support of research and but not fully completely equipped for marine research. These 99 vessels, which are now probably a little bit over 100, are operated by, at that time, by 62 operators, institutions in 23 different European countries. And out of those, only 6 own more than 5 research vessels. So it's quite spread out thin all over the European continent. Average age at the time was for the vessels were 25 years, and we can split them equally into 3 parts: the local and coastal class, the smallest ones, the regional class, which is the mid-size vessel, and the ocean and global class vessel, those who goes on the high seas and crisscrossing the world oceans. Out of these 99 vessels at the time, 8 of them are deep sea vessels that can deploy equipment to any sea depth in the European area at least, and a total of 16 vessels that can conduct some types of research or sampling in the deep seas. There was also 9 polar vessels with ice-breaking capability in the European fleet, and a total of 24 out of the 99 that have some level of ice-going capability. So it's quite a diverse and heterogeneous fleet that we are talking about. For those who are not so familiar with the research vessels, what do we use them for? Well, it's for all types of marine science. Some can do basically every type of science from the same vessel. Others are more specialized and typically works in for example, mostly in oceanography or mostly in the biology field or geology, and some doing all. Some of the vessels are also equipped for fish stock assessment. Most of them have some level of weather data collection capabilities, and many of them are, and more coming these days, is to be platforms for the deployment, service and recovery of autonomous vehicles such as ROVs, AUVs, gliders and so on, and also for stationary observation systems. Either they are located on the seafloor or anchored in the water column or on the sea surface. And also some of the vessels also have as a main task, or one of their tasks, to do logistical support to Antarctica research stations. So it's a wide variety of tasks, and depending on the age and the size of the different vessels, they have typically different capabilities. One example of the new and most modern, most capable is the Belgica 2 that has just entered into service in Belgium. Also, what is typical for research vessels is that they have a wide variety of winch systems and cranes and A-frames and L-frames, so they are able to support many different types of equipment, from that working either in the water column or on the ocean floor, deploying equipment, towing equipment, working over the side. So most of the modern vessels have a huge number of winches with different, some with wires, some with coax cables, some with fiber optic cables, some with synthetic ropes, and so on and so forth. So each of the vessels have its own unique character and complement. Then a few words about what trends do we see? Well, we see after some years of not very much going on in terms of renewal and expansion of the European research vessel fleets. I will show you in a minute what the situation and the near future looks like, and it's quite a positive picture on that level. We see that the use of autonomous vehicles, either they are on the surface or in the water column, is growing rapidly, and more advanced technology is coming into service, both for research purposes but also for more commercial and industry users. And also the use of stationary observing platforms. As I said, either they are on the ocean floor, in the water column, or on the surface. The number of those are growing steadily, both in Europe and elsewhere. We see that there's still more to come in terms of research vessel designs. They are becoming more and more sophisticated, more and more capable, and very much design focus on the deep seas and the polar regions. It's maybe where we see most of the new designs, novel designs, other developments. Use of satellite communication to deliver near real-time data and video to shore has grown quite a bit, especially in the COVID period, where a lot of scientists were sitting ashore instead of being on board the vessels in order to minimize the number of people on board at the same time due to this COVID-19 situation. But also we see that satellite communication is growing, and the prices are on its way down. The bandwidth capabilities, it's on its way up, both in the geostationary field, but also with these smaller satellites like this. Elon Musk is shooting up a lot, and others are shooting up a lot of small satellites going in medium angle orbits around the globe. So that's a commercial development that will benefit the research fleet, because today the use of satellite communication is quite expensive, and the bandwidth available is still a bit limited. I will also say a few words about opportunistic hydrographic mapping of international waters worldwide, which is also the International Hydrographic Office is very aggressive on that. As I mentioned, we've had the 3 Eurofleets projects, the ongoing Eurofleets Plus and the ARISE project for the polar vessels has been given quite substantial funding by the Commission to offer transnational access to scientists, students, instrument technicians to go on cruises on the most capable European research vessels that may not be available to everybody around Europe. And also at the end, I will say a few words about this proposal through the Eurofleets Plus project to develop a legal entity called Eurofleets Research Infrastructure, or Eurofleets RI. So in terms of fleet renewal, this is vessels that are already built or introduced since 2019. Like in Greenland, they got this new Tarayok vessel. The Faroes have got their Jakobsveri. Ireland has got their Tom Crean. Belgium got the Belgica 2, as I mentioned. In Sweden, they got the Svea and the Skagerrak. And in Italy, they have been on the used market, where they have taken over the Ernest Shackleton from British Antarctic Survey, and they have it's now named Laura Bassi and has already been to Antarctica under Italian flag. And very lately, they also took over the Falkor from the Schmidt Ocean Institute, and it's now named the Gaia Blue. And as far as I know, will be in service for CNR in the near future. In Norway, we have three coastal vessels in the pipeline. They're already under construction. The Princess Ingrid Alexandra for IMR, for my institution, Geologen for the Norwegian Geological Survey, and Berit Perlsdatter for the University of Tromsø. And also since 2019, the UK new polar vessel, the Sir David Attenborough, has been put into service. So since from 2020 to now, it's been quite a big change and improvement in the fleet size and more modernized. And also in the pipeline is Iceland has announced that they are building a Bjarni Sämundsson replacement, and it will be delivered in 2024. Germany has recently announced that they are building a Meteor 4, which will be delivered in 2026. The Netherlands are working now on the Pelagia replacement. It's out for bids at the moment, so it will probably be delivered somewhere in the late 24 or early 25. Spain just recently announced that they are building a new vessel for the IEO, the Fisheries Institute in Spain. And last week, I received information that Germany now formally has announced that they will build a new Polarstern, the Polarstern 2, and that it will be in service around 2027. So all in all, I think the take-home message on fleet renewal, our prayers has been heard, and we see quite an impressive development over just a couple of years. I mentioned earlier this about autonomous vehicles and this very rapid growth in use and development of such vehicles, both in the air with the unmanned air vehicles, on the sea surface with the unmanned surface vehicles, and in the water column with the autonomous underwater vehicles and gliders and floats. Some of them shown here as different types of equipment, and they will, at least for the foreseeable future, most of them work in close combination with the vessels. Some of them, like these huge sail drones, they are working completely autonomous crisscrossing the world oceans. Some of them, like this USV Sounder, that we get delivery of 2 of those at the end of this year, which will at the beginning work together with vessels, and hopefully later they can have up to 20 days of autonomous operations. So this is mostly, in my mind, an augmentation to the vessel, but also that they can work independently in many cases. But we see that many of them needs support, sometimes emergency recovery if they stop somewhere out there. So and some of them will work in combination out in the field together with the vessel. So the vessel will do its survey and at the same time controlling one or more autonomous vehicles in the nearby areas. But of course, all to handle this kind of equipment, to control them, to maintain them, to do fault finding and repair and maintenance means that there are many new challenges for the vessel crews and the instrument technicians that needs to update their skills and get sufficient training, and that the vessel operators also now need to take this into account in design of new vessels, but also in upgrading and modifying existing vessels to find the necessary deck space, power supply, and so on, and to develop safe and efficient handling systems for such a diverse group of vehicles. So this is a very interesting area that many of the vessel operators and the vessel operator organizations will deal with and share best practice and learning from each other in the coming months and years. I also mentioned the stationary systems, and I use the EMSO as an example. You see here with all these green circles here, that's the EMSO systems, some of them deployed, most of them, some of them in the pipeline. And as you can see, they are quite big and heavy equipment that takes lots of deck space, heavy cranes or A-frames and so on to handle. And it is a discussion, and some philosophical, some more practical, on how the research vessel fleet should meet this challenge in terms of either having dedicated vessels, a few of them serving all these different sites around Europe, or that some or a number of the ocean-going, the global class vessels can be designed so that they have the necessary deck space and capability to actually handle both the equipment itself and not least the cables and the wires going in between, because that can need quite a lot of deck space to handle in a safe and efficient manner. So many challenges for an RV operator that's in the works and already here, and that will be even more in the near future. So about what do we see from vessel design developments? Well, we see that the vessels are growing in size. Typically, to make room for more cabins, for more scientific personnel on the cruises, more laboratories, both specialized and generic ones, large open work decks in order to handle what I showed on the previous slides, these observatories, landers, moorings, autonomous vehicles, and other what we call lexis, or large exchangeable instruments. So in order to handle this, we also need larger and more capable cranes. We also need them to be motion compensated for the waves, and to have A-frames and winches that can handle increasingly larger and heavier equipment, and to reach all the time larger water depths. Another area that we all are aware of is the need for reduction in emissions to air. And partly the industry is helping us on that when it comes to diesel engines that we typically still use on vessels and will use in the foreseeable future, because there are no alternative to marine diesel when it comes to compact energy transport. The other batteries and hydrogen or whatever takes very large volumes. So I think we will see diesel engines being the main propulsion system for the ocean-going vessels in at least in my lifetime. But the good thing is that the industry and the legal bodies are making sure that we get more and more low emission diesel engines. Nowadays what we call the Tier 3 certified vessel engines. And in some cases and more cases, we try to combine it with use of liquid natural gas, biodiesel, fuel cells, battery packs, etc. And right now, of course, the diesel prices has doubled in just a few months. So other alternatives at the moment could actually be more cost or lower cost than the traditional marine diesel. But not many, if any, non-emission RVs so far, due to the operational profile of most of the vessels. It's that they run long cruises far from shore. There is limited supply points for this LNG, LPG, methanols, hydrogen, etc. Around the coast of Europe and other parts of the world. And of course, as I said, they require large storage volumes, which creates then difficulties if you want to keep the vessel size as small as possible. And I will also talk in a minute about the EVR, the European Virtual Infrastructure in Ocean Research, which is part of the Eurofleet's projects. And as I mentioned, the increased use of satellite communication with growing bandwidth demands, which is also a typical trend for new research vessels and upgrading of existing ones. So what's the EVR? Well, it's the Eurofleet's projects. Yeah, I think as far as I remember, it started in the Eurofleets 2 and has been also carried on into the current Eurofleets Plus project, where we try to build up a kind of a toolbox for both to see the cruise programs that many of you know from the POGO database, and we will also have an ERVO webinar next week about cruise programming tools, where we will see how we can do better than the current POGO system portal. You can also there find the cruise summary reports database that is also maintained through the POGO portal and the Eurofleets or the EVR portal. You have connections to the European Research Vessel database that is maintained by the Eurosian organization. And you find also information about some of the Eurofleets and European research vessels. You can see in real time data about their operations and download the data collected at sea. And for more details, you can go into this website here on the eurofleets.eu. And here's just an example of what you can find there of data from, in this case, I think I've taken from a Spanish one. And you can then find data about what the things looks at the surface in the water column and so on and so forth. And hopefully this can be further developed and expanded into other types of near real-time research data and be able to download it from this website. I mentioned also the opportunistic hydrographic mapping, and that's because as we can see, the Nippon Foundation, GEBCO, they have a project where the target is to cover 100% of the ocean floor by 2030. It sounds like this CO2 goals that has been set, and the status per last year is that only 20.6% of the ocean floor on a global basis is actually mapped with modern instruments. And the IHO, the International Hydrographic Organization, has realized that they have to rely on also others than the hydrographic services, especially to do the international waters. And very many research vessels have multi-beam echo sounders and can deliver data with a pretty high accuracy, which is way better than no data to have almost hydrographic standard accuracy on the water depths. So everybody is encouraged to support them and deliver data if they are capable. So lastly, talk a few minutes about what we do on the transnational access. Over the different Eurofleets projects from 2009 and up to the end of October 2023. And in addition to the ongoing ARISE polar vessel program, you can see that we have had this 160 proposals for transnational access to vessels. 65 of them has been granted, which has resulted in 642 cruise days and 87 large equipment days on transnational access. And the number of people who have taken part so far, since we haven't completed it yet, 719 plus those who still haven't been run those cruises, has been given the opportunity to go on the most capable research vessels and do science or get training. So quite impressive numbers, but after 2023, we don't see that the writing on the wall is that there probably won't be another Eurofleets project. So therefore, we have started to look at other ways of maintaining this transnational access system for Europe. And the ideas we are working on, and we are delivering a report on this at the end of June to the Commission on how we can build a legal entity that we call the Eurofleet's RI, as I mentioned at the beginning, to be the management office for transnational access, either funded by the Commission or in-kind contribution from the different European research vessel operators and other research vessel related activities on networking, joint research, etc. in the future. And this is just showing the typical areas that we think that this entity can work with, like being a marketplace for charter, barter, transnational access, in-kind contributions, etc., training activities for students and technicians and young scientists, and different networking activities, and also to be the secretariat for the European Research Vessel Operators Group. Thank you. I'm 1 minute over half an hour, but thank you for your attention. And now I leave the floor again to Sheila and to take care of whatever questions and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Per. That was great. I was just, let me just click my last tweet off. Was trying to tweet as you speak, as I usually do. So thank you very much. That was really interesting. It was good to see the follow-on from our document that has happened in the last couple of years. It looks like there's lots happening, so that's wonderful. And I open the floor to questions. I'll remind you that you can put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom. But while you're thinking of those, we have some questions from the Secretariat side already. Paula asks that in the document that we wrote a couple of years ago now, that there's often we wrote that there's gender diversity and differing ability issues that are not always taken up on board when designing, for instance, research vessels. You know, I guess in previous times, research vessels were designed with men in mind and not with women. And she gave a link to a paper, which maybe Paula, you can put it in the chat. I don't know if everybody can see the chat, but there's a paper that specifically came out in the Journal of Marine Technology Society, which is talking about the changes that are needed for gender equality in ocean-going research vessels. You know, things like making sure the fish boxes aren't that heavy, that you find ways to get the right equipment to deal with this. And you were also mentioning the kind of new equipment and how they often, you know, more difficult to deal with for anybody. And so her question is, do you see any of those changes? Do you think that these considerations are happening in design of new vessels?
Well, I think in general, we try to avoid heavy lifting and heavy carrying for everybody. We try to, one of the design principles for research vessels is to minimize the distance from where a sample comes on board to where it's going to be analyzed or preserved, basically because to avoid all this carrying heavy boxes and crates around. So, and that goes for both sexes and also part of this health and safety. So it's not like men are in a very good physical conditions either these days. So that's going through, that's cross-cutting everything to avoid heavy lifting and carrying. And for other areas, you see there are more and more single cabins. There are maybe 2-person cabins, and you in most cases you have enough cabins, so you don't have to mix people who share cabins, and all cabins with their own bathroom, showers, and everything. So I think the standards of the hotel part of the vessels are coming up to a very high level, except for the very small vessels that may be a little bit more of a like a pleasure craft standard on things, but at IMR we run a fleet of 9 vessels, and basically all of them are now quite well adapted to both sexes, and we have plenty of female scientists and technicians and crew members. So I think that's probably in the forehead of most vessel designers that we have to take that into account.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then another question from Paula is another good one. Have you seen an increase in demand in recent years because of the Ocean Decade, the UN Ocean Decade, or the Mission Ocean, for instance, in Europe? Do you see a correlation, or is it a little bit too quick to say?
Well, we did a survey some couple of months ago among ERVO members on the daily rates for operating the vessel, the economical part of it, and we also asked for how much spare capacity do you have, and the number shows that for the ocean-going vessels, the spare capacity is basically 0. There's a very few of them. A couple of them have only 1 crew, and they could do much more if they had a second crew, but then you would also have to double the number of cruises, so the demand would have to increase quite enormously. But all in all, the capability for the ocean-going vessels is completely maxed out. It's on the coastal and some of the regional class, the smaller vessels that have spare time, but then also mainly because they have a single crew. Mm-hmm. So there isn't much much spare capacity, and to my knowledge, the number of cruise applications and plans people have is growing constantly, maybe a bit because of Ocean Decade, but I think it's the ongoing trend that has been for many years, that there are more and more science being done, more and more scientific projects, climate change and all that. So the demand is probably increasing, and as we could see from the renewal of the fleet, it's obviously that this is something that's high on the political agenda around Europe, and that I think still we can say that the demand is higher than the supply, especially on the larger vessels and the most capable ones. Mm-hmm. But what the connection is, I don't know, hard to say.
Okay. Then we have a question in Q&A. Thank you, from Panu Haninen. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing your last name right because there's an umlaut on it. But the question is, and specifically talking about 70-meter vessels. If an organization has a pretty good idea what are the needs for the new research vessel, so he says they have a research vessel at the moment. How much time in general does it take to build a new research vessel, including the planning and the building itself?
Let's say from my experience over the last 20 plus years, that the building period is typically 18 to 24 months if everything is normal. Now with this supply problems and all that, it's probably going to stretch out quite a bit more, but typically 18 to 24 months for the yard part of it. But and to design a new vessel, I have done 4 or 5 of them or something like that, 6. I would say that that takes a year and a half at least, together with the design company. So if you if you go for a yard and design in one contract, it would be probably 3 years rather than 18 to 24 months. But the longest time, at least for government institutions, is the political process and the annual budget process. So I would say that rule of thumb from your ministry or funding agency has said that they are willing to work for a new vessel to be designed and built, that you talk in the order of magnitude 5 years. All in all, where maybe at least 1 year, maybe 2, is lost in waiting for the budgetary process in the parliaments.
I will add to that. I know when I used to be in the UK, they spent about, I don't know, 2 years planning the new big research vessel, whose name escapes me at this moment, the Attenborough, and they were planning that with scientists, you know, trying to make sure that they get the right specs from a scientific point of view. But yeah, I think so. So I guess there's also that in mind, that you have to think about what do you want the vessel to be before you even get to the asking for money. Yeah. So you have to be sure that you know what you want, because of course you could.
Yeah, and I mean our new polar vessel took 10 years altogether, where 3 or 4 of them were actually political issues. So yeah, so it's hard to say, but less than 5 years, I think then you have a very smooth ride.
Yeah. And then we have a question from William, but I will, because it's gonna, my comments and question will follow on from his. I was when the document came out, we went to speak to the people, and we went to give a presentation in Vigo, where there's a lot of shipbuilders. And one of the things that they mentioned there was that sometimes the specs, that because it takes so long to get the financial approval, by the time the specs that you make up for a new ship, you know, would say you need this kind of technology, and then it takes 3 years, and then there's new technology, but you have no approval for that technology because of the way the process works. Have you come across this, and is there a way to deal with that better?
My experience is that don't jump into new technology to be the first one, or to be one of the first users. I mean, that's, of course, somebody has to do it and be more courageous than me, but I've done some 35 years in project management and new builds and so on, and it is really a risk, and like these things with new energy systems and so on. I would really recommend anybody, especially in a government organization, to leave that to the industry and to those who have a big pile of money, because for government projects you get the funding, but you don't get anything extra. Yeah. So I would strongly recommend to be on the safe side, let others go in front and pave the way, and wait until the technology is mature before you introduce it into your designs and your fleet.
Yeah, and then this follows on completely on that. William Moon said he's a naval architect who's based in the US, but he's living in Vigo. That's where the comment came from. And he's asking if you're seeing any changes in how vessels handle solid wastes, or is it still or is the standard of using incinerators still normal in new vessels? Is there a different way that vessels deal with solid wastes?
Yeah, well, in our new polar vessel, we don't have any sewage going overboard, for example. We have treatment plants, we put it into tanks, so we discharge everything on shore. And if you work in coastal areas and all that, you don't discharge anything, and you do this, you separate paper and glass and food waste and all that. So that is very much on the agenda for any research vessel. I think it's also based on your profile that you are actually working on saving the planet and and protecting the environment, and then you should have as little negative impact on the environment as possible. So yes, we still have incinerators and so on, but we try to deliver as much as possible to the renovation services ashore and not let anything go up in the air or into the water.
Okay, and we have a question also in the chat from Giuseppe Magnifico. Hi, Giuseppe. He's asking how has COVID impacted on the activities of research vessels? And he says, thank you for a great presentation.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Giuseppe. I think very different. At IMR, we didn't stop cruise activities at all. We have run all the cruises that we planned to do, but we put people in isolation before going on the cruises. We introduced very strict rules for to be in the same room working together, food services and all that. So we didn't have any incident. But others like the University of Bergen, University of Tromsø, others typically with lots of students and all that, they canceled all their cruises for a long period of time. But we took a chance or a calculated risk, and it turned out to work very well as long as everybody, by crew members and scientific party, were adhering to the rules and regulations that we had put into service. So it is manageable, but in some cases, like I said, when on the ROV cruises and all that, most of the science parties stayed ashore, and then they were streaming video from the ship to shore, so they could monitor all the ROV operations from shore instead of sitting in the operation center on board the vessel, and have basically the same results. And
do you think that type of interaction will continue? Do you think post-COVID a lot of scientists will say, well, it's definitely not worth my while going for 6 weeks to see if I only have 3 days?
Yeah, well, I think it's a trend in many cases that instead of putting scientists to see, that they use more and more of the science technicians to do the sampling and the data collection. But of course, scientists also want to be hands-on and for their own purpose, their own training, build their own experience. But I would imagine that for many it would be nice to do remote instead of being away for weeks at the end, maybe for a limited part of the time is exactly for your interest. And also it's a money issue, that if you can limit the number of people, then it's less costly. And I know also in the UK that they bring so much equipment on board that there is hardly room for scientists, that technicians takes up all the bunks. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think, and also when you get a good bandwidth, it's like now when we have done 2 years with Teams and Zoom, I think people are so used to participating remotely that will be more and more an industry standard, but depending on that, you have the sufficient bandwidth to do it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of comes to a question that I had as well, that I remember when we were talking about what, the issues surrounding all the research vessels, one of the things that somebody mentioned in the working group was the fact that quite often there was live upload of data that people wanted to have. Maybe it was in a different working group now, but anyway, I remember this conversation that sometimes it's, you might want to actually have from the research vessels live upload to data, and it often can only happen when you're close to shore. So do you think that there's been an expansion of like satellite upload of data or something like that?
Yeah, as I said, there are some companies very aggressively marketing now new satellite services. You know, traditionally the oceans where you cannot sell commercials to very many, so most of the commercial satellites do not have a footprint in Africa, part of Asia, because of you can't market alcohol or cigarettes or whatever. So they are very specific on where the ground trace of their satellites, what they are covering, and shipping has, along the shipping lanes, it's quite a good coverage with the geostationary satellites. But now, when, as I said, they are throwing out all these. I think Elon Musk talks about the 1,000 orbiting satellites for communication. That's what they use now in the Ukraine for getting and so this industry is expanding very, very rapidly, and they are very aggressive on pricing and capabilities. So yes, I think in a few years it will be, you will have the same internet access anywhere in the oceans or the polar regions as you have on shore. And that, if that has no impact on the cruise activity and the data transfer and the number of people on board, I would be very, very surprised.
Yeah. And then there's a question from Jana, also one of the Secretariat staff. She's asking, how closely do the people who create these new marine robotics, how closely do they work with you, with the research vessel operators? Is there a close collaboration saying, we want to make this new thing, would we be able to put it off your boat? Or do they go ahead and then afterwards you have to how are we going to deal with this?
I would say both. It's because it's quite a heavy commercial interest in some of these autonomous vehicles, but also, for example, in my country, with the Kongsberg group, have always worked very close with IMR and other academic research institutions, and also because we are often a very well qualified customer or very qualified to put up requirements, and right now we are working with new AUVs and these new USVs that we have ordered, where we have a hands on the wheel on these unmanned surface vehicles to design them with a special gondola for all the equipment, because we want to have lots of instruments in the keel of the boat and that kind of thing. So yes, it's and that's what we also try to achieve through the research vessel operator organizations, to invite industry into our community to share ideas and develop these kind of networks. But of course, some of these guys are really, really clever, and they do very interesting things that we see that, hey, that application can actually be converted or developed into a research application, even if it's now for industry. For example, the AUVs, the autonomous underwater vehicles, the big market for them initially was to inspect oil pipelines and gas pipelines, and for defense purposes and so on, and has more and more become a tool for marine research. So I think it goes both ways, but we shouldn't think that we are the only smart people, because the industry has a lot of really clever people out there. So the key thing is communication and cooperation.
Yeah. And then I have two other questions, and I think we have only 5 more minutes, so I'll ask the first one. In our document, we mentioned that the average age of the marine research vessels was something like 25 years.
25, yes.
Yeah, and with these new vessels coming on board, I don't know how many vessels are falling off the other end. Do you have a feeling for, is it getting better?
No, well, it's not getting worse, but it's not like a dramatic shift in the total fleet. But the interesting thing is that we see renewal both in the ocean going vessels and the coastal vessels, and there are at least a growing understanding that when the vessels become 30, most vessels are capable to work up to 40 years if you do this incremental upgrades and so on. So we say that functional life is at the low end 30 years, at the high end 40 years. But when they turn 30, 35, it's really time to start thinking about the replacement. So I don't think the average age will go dramatically down, but the important thing is that we are able to replace those who are 35 plus years on a regular basis. Because 25 years is nothing. I'm 65. I think 25 is really just a...
For us, it's not so much anymore.
Okay.
And then my last question is maybe not a very fair question, but it's one that I will ask anyway. And that's about, you know, we talk here about European research vessels, but what about, and you were mentioning the fact that there's not a lot of satellite coverage in Africa. What about the research vessels or the research that needs to take place in the South Atlantic, for instance, or Indian Ocean? Do we have a feel for how good the research vessel coverage is for the southern, you know, south, let's put it that way?
I did a survey a year ago or more, and found that in all of Africa, going all the way around, is in the order of 21 vessels, where more than half of them are not really operational, just a handful in the southern part, like South Africa, Namibia, and up in the northwest with Morocco and that part. But no, the situation is, in my view, really bad, both with vessels and with the stationary observatories. And when you know how the ocean currents are moving from the South Atlantic up into our area and so on and so forth, it is, I think it should be a much bigger European American effort for the South Atlantic to actually, both for fish stocks, but definitely for the climate change, to get a better prediction of what is happening with the ocean currents and the chemical contents of the seawater. But it's, and I've been working with, since we have this ship that works only for foreign aid, especially in Africa and parts of Asia. I felt we have built 3 vessels in a row earmarked for that purpose. Nobody else have done it. Others are occasionally in African waters. Some are there quite regularly, but there is no, to my knowledge, no consortium or no network actually trying to work together on how we best can cover the African waters, and in particular West Africa, where you have the best, at least most in terms of fish stocks, but also when oil and gas industry is bigger on the West Africa up to now, and maybe on East Africa that somebody else could pick up the stick there, but yeah, so that is definitely an area that Europe and the vessel community on a global scale could do some more, and probably also with pretty small things we need to do to actually improve the situation quite dramatically. Simply starting with sharing information about cruises and data collected and so on and so forth.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have 1 more minute, so I think it's only for me to say thank you so very much, Per. That was great. It was good to have this chat. I think it was a very interesting webinar as usual, and I look forward to, I think you mentioned there's another webinar next week, so maybe you can let us know what it is, and we can let the people who were there know if they wanted to see that.
I'll send you a message about it. Yes, we'd like to have more participants.
Okay. And I will also say from the Marine Board side, we are taking a summer break. So if I share my screen again, I hope it's there. Yeah, so we're having a summer break, so we will have no webinar in July, and we will have a webinar probably in August again. But keep an eye out on our social media channels for what the title of the new webinar is. We're trying to find somebody to speak it. So I just want to say thank you everyone for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys all back here in August. And again, thank you very much, Per. It was a great.
My pleasure.